My name is Sequoia Smith, and my major is psychology, and I am minoring in biology, and I am a senior. I'm interested in my major because I'm really interested in behavioral neuroscience, and so that's why I went with psychology and biology, because here at SAM we don't have a neuroscience undergraduate bachelor's, so I kind of made my own bachelor's by combining those two. So actually, when I first came to SAM, I thought I was going to be a counselor or a psychiatrist at some point. And so SAM is really good PhD program in clinical psychology, and so I thought I would move from my undergrad into that program. But I have since discovered that I am more of an experimental psychologist and not a clinical psychologist. Actually, I have always really liked being in the lab as far as my classes would go. So those research projects I did in just my classes really started having me think about how I wanted to be more of an experimental psychologist rather than a clinical psychologist. And then I actually got accepted into the McNair Scholar Program. And so with that program, we do a post-bac where we write our thesis. And so I had to reach out to professors and find out what they were researching and see if I could join their labs. I reached out to quite a few professors, and then I was emailed back. Dr. White emailed me back, and he told me that generally he didn't accept students that had not taken his psychopharmacology or his physio class. I had taken psychopharmacology previously to talking with him, and I made an A in that class, so he wasn't okay with that. And I had also taken quite a few biology classes and did well in those classes, so he kind of let me in without meeting his normal requirements. I was glad when he reached out to me because Dr. White is the unofficial neuroscientist at SAM, in my opinion. And so he's definitely a behavioral neuroscientist. And so if I could work under him and be mentored by him, that was going to be great for me. And so I'm really glad that he bent his rules for me and let me into the lab. That'll be our EURECA grant that we're going to be working on. And so we are interested in the gut microbiome and how that may be the pathophysiology of depression. Mostly since the 1950s, we've thought the monoamine theory of depression has been the prevailing theory of depression. But more recently, we have discovered that different systems within the brain, specifically the metabotropic system, also has been shown to have been shown to be a key player in depression. And so what we think is happening is there's a breakdown in bad bacteria spilling out into the gut. And I don't know if you know, but most of your serotonin is actually made in your stomach. And so we're hoping if we can fix the gut microbiome, then we can fix a mood disorder. So we're looking into treating our chicks with pre and probiotics. We're going to do that daily for 2 weeks, and then we're going to run them through our test. So we do an isolation stress test. And so chicks are socially raised, and so when you separate them out and isolate them, they become very anxious in the first 5 minutes of this test. The test is an hour and a half long, but so that first 5 minutes is what we're really looking at for anxiety. And so if these pre and probiotics are working and they are alleviating anxiety, we'll see that the chirps, the distress vocalizations, will decrease in that first 5 minutes. And so we obviously have a control, or we know what it looks like for normal chicks, right? We know that they're really stressed out in that first 5 minutes, and then in the last hour of the test, they actually stop calling out, which is indicative of behavioral despair. And so we can't say they're depressed, but that is our simulation of depression, because they have not reestablished contact with their conspecifics, and so now they've just quit trying. And so that's our simulation for depression. And so if these pre and probiotics are working, we'll see an increase during that last hour of distress vocalizations. And so that's what we're hoping to see. So those are the data points we want. We want to see a reduced calling in that first 5 minutes and an increased calling in that last hour. And so if that works out, will add to the literature of this whole gut microbiome being maybe involved in the etiology and pathology of depression and anxiety. Everything is approved through IACUC, so we are definitely animals are treated very well, right? Yeah. Like they're fed every day, they're kept at the right temperature, like they're taken really good care of. And then our chickens, they're actually from the poultry industry and they're males, so they were going to be killed anyways. And so they actually get to live for a little bit in a well taken care of environment. And then ultimately our data that we can collect will ultimately help humans in the long run. And so we do it for a bigger purpose, which is to help mankind rather. So we have weekly lab meetings, both labs do. So I attend both of those weekly lab meetings. Dr. White's lab, we usually in the meeting will assign articles to present. And so everybody in the lab will eventually, if they haven't already, present an article. And basically that's us reading the article and then someone presents it to the lab and tells them what all the important aspects of the literature was. Other than that, we also have ongoing research where we are in the vivarium testing probes or drugs rather on different animals. And so if we can discover drugs that work in this model, this might move from preclinical into clinical trials. And this could help lots of people because the efficacy rate is really quite depressing when you think about it. And that's probably because we don't have the etiology and pathology of depression down yet. So being wrong, right? Doing the experiment and it doesn't work. Like that's challenging because it's like you read everything you could read and you thought this was it, and then you get in the lab and you didn't collect the data that you wanted to collect. I mean, you got data and that's always good. Data is good. It moves you into a normal direction or a better direction rather. You know, you can say, okay, this didn't work, maybe we'll try this. But that's the most challenging part, is having to do it over or try again or start from the beginning. And that's just research in general though, so I feel like that's just my life's challenge, is probably going to have to get used to the data is not always going to be what you hypothesize it to be, right? So the people mostly, like I enjoy the people in my labs. I enjoy learning too, so that's always fun for me to learn a new model or a new paradigm, to work with a new model or paradigm. We're working with the chicks in the July EURECA grant in a new way. Like I've never gavaged a bird, and so we're going to be giving the birds pre and probiotics, and we're going to use a needle that we stick into, and it's not that we stick it in, because when they're small chicks they like open their mouths for anything, so we're going to put it down into their stomach and we're actually going to give them the pre and probiotics like that. In the past in the lab, when we were looking at the gut microbiome axis, or the gut microbiome, and we were using pre and probiotics, we were actually just putting it in their water, and so we weren't really sure exactly like how much they were getting, if they were getting the same amount, if it was dead or alive. I mean, what we were giving them said it was a live strain, but it could have died in the heat, you know, we don't know. So this is a new technique that I'm gonna have learned, and so that's really fun and exciting. Definitely reach out to professors. And so before you reach out to them though, don't just reach out and be like, I want to research, right? You have to research the professors. So you have to go and you have to like look them up and then look up their research, right? And then they all have written papers. And so you read their papers and you figure out what it is that they're researching. And then you decide, like, do I want to learn those skills? Do I want to learn how to be an experimental psychologist? Or would I rather be a clinical psychologist and make surveys? Or would I like to be a biologist in a lab, and would I want to work with, would I want to do immunohistochemistry, or would I rather do like growing bacteria or looking at viruses? Like, you have to decide what motivates you or what you're passionate about. And obviously you're not going to do this, if you do get into a lab, you think of it as like a training, right? I'm in training right now. This isn't my life's work, but this is my training. And so if you go into it like that and you think about what you want to do for your life's work, then you choose a lab based on that, right?